just kind of felt, yeah, there's so many things I want to talk about, but I really do want to talk about language and our role in the world as far as language is concerned, because I think it is desperate. And I feel the Dean already touched on it. You know, there are these great moments in history where you can see something profound is happening, which is shifting the whole paradigm. And we know it's happening now, and it might not be in our interests, if I can put it like that, or it might be doing something to our culture that we know not what of. And of course I'm talking about the internet, the computer, the information revolution, the thing that we're doing all the time. And why it feels is that it is becoming so, I don't want to say, maybe dangerous is the wrong word, but all my antennae are out about this, is because we're actually somehow severing the idea of the thought and the feeling in the body, and it finding language and it being put out there, human being to human being, and that through this we find out what it means to be human. And so what we're doing is we're actually getting on these networks and we're talking to people that we don't see, that we don't hear, and that we don't really have any visceral sense of the language that's going on. And yet there is this massive amount of communication that's going on. And we don't know where this is coming out. We don't know what it's doing to our brains. We don't know what it's doing to our societies. It might be incredible, but somehow, because we live in the world of the spoken word, it's going, danger, danger, danger. And so I wanted to talk for a little while about this, and then I wanted to have a kind of Socratic dialogue for the last 20 minutes maybe about what you think about it. So, because one of the things about this thing is it is incredible that we're here with each other and we have this common passion of Shakespeare, which means that intuitively within ourselves we're drawn to something that is larger than ourselves, and we inhabit this world. So we know things about each other on an intuitive level that we can trust, if I can put it like that. So I wanted to talk about what I see and perceive, and then maybe we all try and join in the conversation. In fact, listening to Lisa just directing a little bit of The Tempest, a scene I hate in The Tempest, you know, all that stuff about Clarabelle and blah, blah, blah. I was just listening to her, and I suddenly got a whole perspective about Dido and Aeneas and what that marriage was on a symbolic level and what Shakespeare was talking about, because I was listening to what she was saying, and then when I fed it back to her what I heard, she hadn't even thought of that. Do you know, if I can put it like that, it's extraordinary that a piece of knowledge came forth because of me listening to the text of what Lisa was saying, and that stimulated another depth of knowing from me, that I then could say to her, my God, you were so brilliant. She said, I didn't even know I was doing that. There is something about our relationship to language, because we use it all the time, because we are the greatest master of language is our master, that language itself throws up ideas from the unconscious mind. That there are ideas in language that we don't even know is embedded in there. And through the saying and listening, not the writing and the seeing, but the saying and listening, something happens to us, right? That it actually allows information to come forth. Are you with me? And it was so startling. I snuck into the back of what she was doing and listened to 5 actors doing these words of a scene I didn't even like. And then she just pointed out the scene goes from verse to prose, and well, I shouldn't say this because you're going to say it in your thing, but then goes back to verse again. So simple in pointing out that Shakespeare had written a structure which was indicative of how we might be able to perceive this, and how the actors' rhythms would change because of that, and how it would tap into different sensory perceptions of what was going on. And one of the other things which is so exciting to me at this particular time is all the work that's going on in neuroscience, you know. And in Greek times, they just thought there was kind of three cavities in the brain, you know, and they thought that grey stuff wasn't anything, and now, of course, we discover it's the most incredible source of information. I mean, we can't even begin to know all the stuff that is in our brains. But there's one thing that's happening about neuroscience and about the art of memory, which is very inspiring to me, because I think Shakespeare's genius came out of the fact, in many ways, that he was tapping into and learned all his days, you know, 6 days a week, the art of rhetoric, which we'll talk a bit about. But the art of rhetoric has, as you all know, these 5 departments, one of which is what's the point of what you're talking about. The second is what's the arrangement of what you're talking about. So what are you going to say first, and how are you going to support what you're going to say second? Then the style, all those figures of speech that people like Becky and various other people are working on to actually see what that does to your imagination that you use. You know, we know because of similes and metaphors, well, there's a difference between a simile and a metaphor, but they had thousands of figures of speech in order to open up their philosophical, psychological, and poetical souls so that they could more accurately create the images that you needed to create because of our sensory perceptions, which we'll get back into in a minute, but also so you could learn it much better, learn it faster, and the whole thing of what the imagery and style is of what you're saying has such a profound effect upon not just the human psyche, but the human body. Then there is delivery, which is the fourth one, which is our voice and movement exercises, you know, that we do sometimes every day of our lives. Some of us for 3 years in training in the conservatory and think, thank God that's over, I never need to do that again. But actually allowing that we are our instrument, you know, and what people are seeing is us. And then the fourth is the art of memory, which is the one we're losing most rapidly because, of course, we all have access to instant information. But it's not like Shakespeare's memory, in which he had to learn what he was studying every day of his schooling life. At the end of the day, they said it back. At the end of the week, they said the whole thing back. Then on Sunday, they'd heard the sermon, and they'd automatically learn that. It is no wonder those actors could learn a play in a day and get up there, and with a few mnemonics, you know, and a list on the back, they could more or less get through it because their memories were so incredible, but they also were cross-referencing. So when Shakespeare's writing a play, the fact that Ovid appears 1 minute and Holinshed the next minute and Plutarch the next minute, you know, and then he's got a bit of Apuleius stuck in there and then a little Socratic dialogue, you know, and he's using mostly the art of rhetoric to write the plays. So he's cross-referencing his own mind, and he's writing in the art of rhetoric, which is the art of persuading somebody who doesn't know something into being persuaded and using your whole emotional, feeling, intellectual sense to do that. Not the art of logic, although in As You Like It, as you know, he switches into the art of logic with Touchstone and the if and all that stuff. But in the art of logic, which is what they used in the universities, they were proving what was already known. The art of rhetoric opens up the question, and you are trying to ask what the hell's going on and what can we learn from this. All these people who say it couldn't have been Shakespeare because he didn't go to university are daft. If he'd have gone to university, it would have wrecked him. He would have started trying to prove what was already known, not saying, what is it that we don't know? And that journey of what is it that we don't know, and how are we going to go from, hundreds, all through the Middle Ages, there's only one way of looking at the universe. I'm talking about the general body of knowledge, of course, in universities and things. There were other little pockets of different knowledge, but by and large, the whole culture, God up there, king second, who is God's anointed, the dukes, the earls, the lords, the yeomen, the farmers, the blah, 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 right down to the peasants, the serfs, the people of no name, as he says in Henry V. Doesn't it always get you? Before then with the band of brothers, he that sheds his blood today with me is my brother, we'll always remember each other. Then after the battle, well, who died? The Earl of Westmoreland, this, that, and 500 of no name. Doesn't it always get you? And I guess because I always know I'd be one of those people with the no name. Anyway, but, going from a place where the universe was defined through, what you might call the Christian codified knowledge, I'm going to call it that, as opposed to something as generative as the Gospels, which is a different... but that you went from that into suddenly thinking maybe there's a republic, maybe it's not God in his heaven, maybe there are a whole load of gods, and opening up the questions. So we're the carriers of this knowledge. We are the people who actually are still trying to get more and more deeply in touch with what Shakespeare was about and lending ourselves to those ideas and to that language, which is why the close reading of the text is so important. But how we read the text, of course, might be one of the fights we have later in the day. But that it actually, I'm sure everybody knows that one reason why we do Shakespeare is because we end up being bigger people after we've done a Shakespeare play. You know more about yourself than you ever thought was possible to know about yourself. And you've expanded because you did this Shakespeare play. So that's a kind of where the universe we live in, which is why I love being with all you lot. And the idea that you can actually gain wisdom and insight just from swapping information that has no visceral part to it. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're just getting a bit of thing in your brain. Means that it goes away again, or you maybe can build something on it, but it's not changing your bloody life while you do it. The best thing about neuroscience, of course, is that we now know that all our brains are more or less the same. They're the same size, they're the same thing. So it doesn't matter which race you are, it doesn't matter which gender you are, it doesn't matter any of that other stuff. We've all got the same brains. And that gives me great hope, because it does mean we can build up a connectivity between, religious groups. There is a chance we can really fundamentally understand each other because our brains are not different. Now, of course, obviously what happened to you in your life builds up different dendrites and how the accents hit the neurons and all those things. But the potential for us understanding each other is absolutely there because our brains are all the same. So you might have been brought up in Timbuktu and be the opposite gender or a third or fourth gender. You might be, a different color, a different height, a different breadth, all that stuff, a different age, but the potential for understanding each other is there. And this inspires me. And it inspires me because with Shakespeare, you know, what we know is we're not doing one point of view up there on stage.